session on, yeah. So welcome to another edition of CFI Festival Learning Series. I'm sure that this will set the tone for more festivals of learning the coming days. Like a good monsoon that's happening now is harbinger of great festival season. Similarly, hope that this will also bring in more learning interactions for all of us. And I think we should have had this in Woodlands, our normal meeting place. Right? So, and it's grateful that it's wonderful to see coaches and other coming from other cities, other chapters. So normally we meet in Woodlands. Possibly we should have had this in Woodlands in a hybrid mode, but I think we should target the next meeting there. I think the only lame excuse I can possibly give is today is International Lasagna Day, what I learned today. Woodlands, unfortunately, does not serve lasagna. So we are constrained to have it in a virtual mode. So again, welcome all of you. And I'm super pleased to again have our panelists with us, Kambali Mahajan, Sonal Vaidya, and Balaji Kumar. Thank you all for agreeing our invitation and being here with us to share your experience, learning, views. So I'm sure that we're going to have a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. I also want to thank you for one more thing, Sonal, Bali, and Balaji. With your presence, I think we have possibly brought down the average age of this group by more than half. But I just wanted to add that I'm a little weak in maths. But that's why it's there. So we're really excited to have you with us. Of course, the special credit, all the credit goes to Krishna and Sri for thinking of a topic like this, so relevant and so timely. Also convincing the panelists to be with us today. So Krishna, Sri, many thanks to you for organizing this, following up, and also ensuring that we have a good representation of coaches here. So without much ado, we will get into our discussions. So we're going to have this in 3 parts. So we'll have a short introduction. I've shared the profile in the group. So we'll not go through the profile again, but we'll have a short introduction. I'm going to do it slightly differently. Then after the introduction, we're going to have it in the discussion in 3 segments. The first part is we'll have opening remarks from the 3 panelists, around say 8 to 10 minutes. So I'll invite each panelist to share their comments, views. The second is a slightly different one where allow curators certain perspectives related to the topic. I'm going to share these perspectives with the panelists and invite them to say whether they agree with that view perspective or they don't agree. It's kind of for and against kind of a thing. So opening remarks around 30 minutes, and this for and against for 5 minutes, 6 minutes each, so around 20 minutes or so. And the third one will be the Q&A. So we'll have open discussion, so we'll have as many questions as possible. Okay, one of the things that we found in most of these webinars is that the Q&A is kind of get rushed. Not too many questions are answered, and thought we'll kind of have more time for Q&A and discussions. I just wanted to add here that the second segment, for and against perspectives, is not something which we have shared with the panelists. So it's going to be something new for them also. So just to add some excitement to our discussions. Please have your questions ready. More than the chat, I would request if you can unmute and then ask the questions to the panelists when we reach that stage. So let's start. And let me introduce the panelists in slightly a different way. So I have one slide for introduction, which I'm going to pull up now. I hope you can see these. A quick thumbs up or anything, just if you're able to see this. Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I asked the three panelists 3 questions, same 3 questions to all of them, and got their responses. I'm going to share their responses with you. The first question is that if you were a brand, what would be your slogan or tagline? Gandhali has to say, just do it, something which we can all relate to. Sonal has this to share: credible, relatable, and flexible. And Balaji, it's more shairi. And probably I want to tell Balaji that the shairi moment is now, Balaji. So we hope to hear more perspectives, more shairi from you as we go along. The next question asked them was this: what are the top 3 qualities that make an HR superstar? Gandhali has to share this: interpersonal connect, ability to create trust. Ambiguity is something which is so critical for all of us to deal with. Sonal has this: being a change agent, a very important characteristic of an HR leader. Strategic agility, business acumen. She is graceful enough to add 2 more: social intelligence and organization stewardship. Balaji is more direct, just, fair, and equitable. The third question I asked them was that now that you have come this far, so a lot of accomplishments. I think Pradeepta shared the trophy Sonal won. Right? So a lot of accomplishments, a lot of highs, lows. At this stage, what one advice would you give to your younger self who's just stepping into the corporate world? Bali has to share this: the faster you fail, the faster you learn. So important for us. And Murphy is always going to have hanging around, no matter what. So Gandhali, I just wanted to add that Murphy is my BFF too. And I'm grateful for 2 individuals who helped me grow professionally. One is my boss, other is Murphy.
Couldn't agree more. Keeps us on our toes, and agilities and dealing with ambiguity just makes it a part of the game.
Yeah. So Sonal has to share this: everything we want is outside of a comfort zone. So true. Right? Don't stop yourself from exploring and failing. Okay, so the failure is a kind of common thread between Gandhali and Sonal, and how important it is, for young leaders to try out things and not have that fear of failure. Balaji is more direct. Have a good mentor, okay, which is very, very important when you grow in the organization, when you're putting your teeth, the formative years. It's always good to have a mentor who can guide you, can handhold you, but you find your space. And as you know, there's all these little trick questions. First, this is what defines the panelists that we have. And This is why they are the superstars. They're in the space they operate in the organization they work with. So thank you, Vali, Sonal, and Balaji for sharing your responses. And with that, we'll kind of have this introduction in place. Then we'll move into the first segment, which is to invite the panelists to share their opening remarks on the subject that we are dealing with. Maybe 8 to 10 minutes, and then let's see where we are. So Sonal, can I invite you to share your thoughts?
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you
go
so
on.
much. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I think this particular topic is really close to my heart. And, you know, the way I really look at it, and if I was to really contextualize this to L&T as a whole, in the last couple of years, and I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, we've really seen the landscape of leadership development changing and evolving. So no longer, you know, when we are talking about C-suite development or when we're talking about leadership development, it's just an intervention which is run by the HR team. In the last 3 years, I've seen the entire leadership development being evolved as a strategic intervention. It's now a part of the company plan. So we do have you know, a plan which is run on 9 tenets, and leadership development and succession planning is a part of that plan. And also, if you were to look at, you know, where does the onus for leadership development really lies? Does it really lie with HR, or should it lie with the CEO of the organization? Now, we've seen that shift happening. So today, if I was to talk about, you know, the entire leadership development, and we call it Leaders League, and in a little while from now, I'll tell you what it really entails. For succession planning, we run an initiative which is called as ALTIM, which is succession planning. The strategic direction and the owner is the CEO of the organization. So while the HR team, you know, rallies around to conceptualize, to facilitate the process, but the face of it is the CEO of the organization. And I feel, you know, to run any intervention around leadership development, it's very important that it's a top-down approach. Another thing which really happens, you know, if we do that, and what we've really done in the L&T parlance is that we've institutionalized a process, and the process is institutionalized to the extent that nobody can progress right from a project leader to a board member until and unless they've gone through the stage-wise leadership process. So every year we identify high potentials, we put them through a development center, and we have tie-up with all the big fours. It's a rigorous 2-day development center, and everybody has to go through it. Whether you're a CXO, whether you're a board member, whether you're aiming to become a CEO, everybody has to go through a development center. And post that, and individual development plan is created, and based on different levels, they're put on a leadership development journey for a period of 1 year. And after that, they become a part of a pool, which is called as Leaders League. And now this is a pool that we treat differently in the organization. We have a differentiated approach for this pool. Currently, we have 17% of high potential sitting in this pool. And I guess, you know, what is really important for us is, you know, anything which has leadership commitment and leadership bearance needs to have a very tangible ROI coming from it. And over the years, we've built that kind of credibility with the kind of tangible output that we've shown. So there are 4 measures of success that we've taken and which we report back. So the number 1 measure of success is what's going to be the size of a talent pool. The second is what are going to be the vertical movements which we are going to do internally, the leadership positions we are going to fill internally. The third is, of course, what's going to be the attrition of this pool. And the 4th measure is for a succession planning framework, which is for N-1 and N-2s. Now, we do have some numbers, and I feel, they're good numbers. We started this initiative around 6.5 years back, and it's really institutionalized now. This year, from the succession planning pool, which is Altum, we filled 25% of people move to business unit head positions from that pool. And I think for us, that was quite a success. Even if we look at terms of vertical movements, till now, we around 24% of the people have already been moved to leadership positions. So those are some concrete measures of success. Something else that we've realized, in the last 3 years is, we can't really have a traditional mode of leadership development. And I think a lot of people here in this meeting are associated with us. A lot of you are associated with us. I think the realization has been that, you can give them conceptual strokes. You can give them that arena to play around and exposure on the job. But what's really important in the current context is, and we've defined, a set of competencies, which in our parlance, we call it as transversal competencies. And the whole idea about transversal competencies in leadership development is that the bearings is on the experience that you draw. How does that help you to go ahead and deal with ambiguous situations? How does that help you to make decisions, in the face of any crisis? So we took help of one of the big fours, and we did carve out a new set of competencies, which we made as an integral part of leadership development. Some of those competencies are around a growth mindset, transdisciplinary. We believe that fluidity and fungibility is the key to leadership development now. And that's where, the belief that coaching becomes an integral part of our leadership journey. Because, if we have to really bring about the transversal competencies in motion, we feel the most impactful way to do it is coaching. And in all our leadership development journeys, we've ingrained coaching as an integral part of our framework. So that's a little bit, about what is that we're doing in L&T Technology Services. And, as we move forward, I'll talk more about it.
Thank you so much, Sonal. I think really great to know the kind of shift that's happening in the leadership development at L&T. It's not just an intervention, but a CEO-led, top-down, strategic kind of program. And it's not just a one-time, which is happening at some part of the year, but throughout.
Yeah.
And identifying top talent, nurturing them from N-2, as you said. What is more pleasing, Sonal, is that coaching is the integral part of it.
Yeah.
It gives a lot of hope for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Again, we have to see as to how we can kind of contribute to the growth of your company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also we rediscover ourselves in the process.
True.
That's why that's the purpose of this meeting, saying how do we kind of relearn, reimagine our own craft. Right?
Sure.
Great, Sonal. That we'll come back to you again with other questions later. Now, can I invite Balaji to share your thoughts, Balaji?
Sure, Raghu, thank you so much. I think let me start by saying that it didn't require any convincing for me to be part of this meeting, Raghu. I owe it to CFI, Ganesh, and RR, who's also on this call, and many of you. So it's not only just a duty, but an honor to be here with all of you. And I can see the names. Each one of them is a stalwart in their own right. I think the learner's mindset with which all of you are entering into this conversation, I think that's a big takeaway for me. Having said that, my perspectives will straddle across a couple of organizations. While earlier I used to look after leadership development at Microsoft, then at the L&T Group, and now I work with Sonata Software. I think for me, the most defining moment happened during the pandemic. Right, we went through rigorous processes of identifying potential competency frameworks, 2-day assessment centers. But there were some instances which really struck me that people who were, quote unquote, identified as high potentials, when faced with crisis, they got numb. But there were people from, unforeseen pockets, people who you would never expect them to really rise up to that occasion. They really took that up, right? So that really set me thinking. And the way, at least now I look at it, I think, and this is something that we are trying to do here. I mean, we just finished this week, we finished our talent, planning and succession planning session. There are 3 mega competencies, if you will, that I really look at now. I think the first one, which I call it as cognitive capital. And this to me is all about the ability to really manage complexity, cognitive complexity, and learning agility. So that's one section. The other section that I call is, again, this is something which is borrowed from existing literature and research. The second, which I really look at, is the social capital. See, increasingly, as organizations are becoming the center stage for everybody's life. I mean, let's look at it this way. Sociologically, 50 years back, there were institutions like religious institutions, churches, joint families, or social communities. They've broken down. And for a lot of us today, the primary institution that we really belong to are the organizations that we work for. And these are nothing but, looked at from another perspective, this is nothing but a social network system. So those people who are really able to build a very strong social capital are the ones who are probably going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And more so, when we talk about AI, I mean, I'm seeing these conversations in our organization. I think everybody is moving towards that side to say Gen AI, generative AI, ChatGPT. But somewhere, are we losing the human side of enterprise? I think it is time for us to really go back to what Douglas McGregor spoke about and redefine the human side of enterprise. Otherwise, all of us would become robots. And it's extremely important that we really look at social capital as a core mega competency or a meta competency, which leaders of tomorrow would start displaying. Last but not the least is what we've seen, especially in the work of Fred Luthans and others, and they have really come up with this concept called the psychological capital. And psychological capital is nothing but your own reservoir of hope, resilience, optimism, and efficacy, in whichever order you put. I think the world is going to see a lot of those black swan moments. And I think your internal reservoir of psychological capital is what will really help you or individuals to really be able to be grounded and be able to navigate that complexity and get people together to really overcome that crisis. So that's how currently, and these are all unvalidated. Maybe one could label them as musings of a skeptic, but I mean that's the space I am in right now. Now, having said that, I think from a core example point of view, when we did our talent management process, at least we've moved away from competencies. While competencies will somewhere be the building blocks, but at least now what at least we are looking at is talent archetypes. And probably this is more contextual to our business. We are on a high growth path, and we'll continue to be there. The industry around is changing very rapidly. But we've really created 3 basic talent archetypes, if you will. So one, what we call are the builders. Now, these builders who are very, very high on all the 3 mega or meta competencies that we spoke about, they have that innate ability to take a concept or a POC, if you will, and really build a business out of it and create value out of it, right? And they have a completely different orientation towards how they look at problems, how they look at, get things done. The second archetype that we are talking about are the enhancers. Now, these are typically people who who've been given something which is already built, but they then scale that up beyond the initial stage. And then, the last archetype, what we call as, are the maintainers. Now, typically what happens is there are these large accounts, large businesses. They need a regular approach to maintain it and continue running it and keeping the lights on. So that's how we are looking at the three archetypes, and we've actually got that. We seem to have got the entire archetypes and identification around that, around 80 to 90% right. And what it does for us is then the builders are actually then allocated to projects, or, for example, Gen AI is coming up in a big way for us. So we're identifying some of those architects and then, who are builders, and putting them there. And then there are new accounts and new business lines which are coming up. And that's where, from the delivery and the sales side, people are getting into those roles and succession slates. So that's how we've been able to really map the organization and the talent requirements which we have. Last but not the least, and this is where I belong to a very microscopic minority in the HR community. It's a provocative proposition. I strongly believe that, I, as the CHRO, and my team, we are the custodians of talent of the organization. And to that extent, my CEO trusts me. Every week, at least, there is a 1 or 2 hour conversation I and my CEO have in terms of the people and, and my perspectives on who is going to make the cut in terms of what businesses, and performance and potential. And he virtually, or for all practical purposes, depends on my perspective on the talent across the organization. And that comes from my own core belief that as much as the CFO plays the role of looking at the assets and liabilities on the financial side, I, as the CHRO, play a similar role from a talent portfolio point of view, and advise my CEO on that count. And as a corollary or the derivative of that, one of the things that we've recently started, and it's too early stage, we'll have to see how it goes. We've started what is called as the Talent Scout program, wherein it's my HR team which actually spreads itself across the organization and constantly scouts for young talent or in the middle management cadre. And they keep on, interacting with talent. They are part of all the business reviews, and then they have the eye for talent. And once they spot the talent, then they bump it up to me, and then I bump it back to the entire leadership team. So that's how I think. Again, as I mentioned, it's too early stage. We'll have to see how it works, but it's a very provocative proposition that at least I hold, saying that. Of course, the partnership definitely is required, and sponsorship is definitely required from the CEO. But I, as a CHRO and the HR organization, we are the true custodians of the entire talent pool within the organization. So those are a few thoughts, Raghu. Back to you.
Great, Balaji. Thanks for this breadth of and very, very fresh perspectives. And the kind of changes that you are bringing in, especially in Sonata, and what really kind of brings that focus or the emphasis is that we believe that the HR is the custodian of talent. That is something which we have seen different perspectives, but this is something, again, that's very, very refreshing. You talked about the social capital, cognitive capital, and the psychology support or capital, how it kind of dovetails into the talent architects. Right? So I talked about enablers who can build and scale, which is another important, very important thing as we grow, and also keep the lights on. So while looking at the future, we also ensure that the current process runs efficiently. Thanks, Balaji. Thanks for so much for your perspectives. Again, come back to you with more questions. So Gandhali, can I now invite you to share your thoughts, please?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raghu. And firstly, thank you so much for having me here as well. It's such an honor to be a part of this council. And I was hearing the views that Sonal and Balaji were kind of bringing to the picture, and they're very insightful. So as we progress, I think I'm going to be bringing in more of questions because that's the zone that we are in presently at Sony as we're evolving, particularly after the pandemic, right? So a lot of things after the pandemic, and I concur with the viewpoints that Balaji was kind of talking about, is we had very clear talent management strategies. We seem to have everything kind of figured out before COVID came. And now things are in a VUCA world. We are grappling with how the change of the landscape, the spectrum landscape from business has changed for TV viewing. So in Sony, the OTT just blew up. So that's the business landscape we are coming from. And linear suddenly went down. So our erstwhile people who were gems and who were talents who were producing content for us on television, how do we build and start moving, content for OTT? Suddenly our drives for talent, our definition of talent started changing. At the same time, what was so interesting for us is that we were a company which was completely creative, right? So we all felt that we had to come together, hash out ideas. So in COVID, when we were kind of just looking at how the evolution was happening, we realized that work from home, new normal, absolutely fine. We started questioning all our thought processes of, do we now need to bring people back to office? And those are questions that are still very alive, very much alive, right? The control that we saw the C-suite struggle with, the HOD struggle with, those are still kind of alive at the moment. And as HR business partners, as HR folks, we're still trying to figure out the right method in the creative spaces to kind of see where we bring them. How do we look at producing that impact of productivity, creativity, and not lose that sensibility, but be able to find talent from across the spectrums of India as well as globe. So your landscape of finding talent has grown absolutely, it's blown out of proportion. It's no longer remain only to one geography, but it's expanded to the globe. And that's the reach that we're now starting to look at. So we were looking at talent management strategies only from an India perspective, and now suddenly the world's your oyster. You can go anywhere. How do you really come to that? So we are in that process of now looking at understanding the change of work, change of the worker, and change of the workplace. And as recent as day before yesterday is when we were actually sitting down, thrashing this out with our CEO, making the right kind of work streams, putting them together, because the hunt for talent is now on and the landscape has become much broader for us. So while we were looking at that, a couple of the other things that we started and things that we're now starting to put more in place is the rise of the gig worker, the gig workforce, the moonlighting. Again, in an industry like ours, it becomes so important because we work with producers, content writers, script writers, and all of them, being put together, and they are so used to contract working. But now how do you get these contract workings into that space and you optimally utilize that in your talent management strategy of build, borrow, and buy, right? So how do you kind of put that together? Because it's very much easy for us to have a C-suite person, but they can actually be on a contract basis for us and be working from LA as a, Hollywood producer. It's very much possible for us. Why? Because that's the level that we are moving towards, because the scope for our industry and the impact of that industry in terms of giving perspective and shaping opinions for the future, you want to see where do you want to go. And right now we are in that process of saying how much of the influence do we want a Western influence, or should we go Eastern, because Eastern, which is your Korean, your Japanese, the anime, that resonates more with our culture. So should we go there? Do we get in and do we work with a contractor C-suite vendor who sets up an entire vertical for us and takes it over with our Japan offices, or let's say from a Japan perspective. So those are the viewpoints of talent that we are kind of, notioning into. and to understand how that kind of builds into our CISO strategies. But the VUCA world definitely was something where we realized the usage of our technical perspectives, where we were and how ready we were, and how fast we had to scale up. The advantages that we had was that we work with a very, very young population. And as we are progressing, the advantage again that we saw with us was that we didn't get limited to geographies. For us, the expansion to a larger geography became much more easier, much more succinct. And that's the next level of expansion that we're grappling with, is how do we spread out to different platforms, to different geographies as fast as possible, to get our Indian medians out as fast as possible, and who are the right people to really kind of take our workspace there. So a couple of the questions that presently, that we are kind of looking at, which would be how the short-term and the long-term goals, because they changed for us. How do we get the best and the brightest, but we get them from across the globe spectrum, not just from our India landscape? And how do we create a leadership bench strength? Now, this is a very interesting area that we grapple with in media, because the fungibility of a corporation is actually looked down upon in media. So it is best to be an independent producer. It's best to be an independent writer. So how do you get the best of your creative talent who owns their freedom so strongly, right? Who wants their own identity to be, so strongly resonating with them? And that's where we realize that we need to look at a leadership bench strength. So while you're looking at those verticals, you can't only just bet on one, but you actually have to look at a perspective of 2, 3, or 4 leadership C-suite level plans. And this is where I like to borrow from Sonal's point as well. We've realized that customized leadership development plan is the only way that we can move in a creative organization. And over here, the dealing with coaching and mentoring becomes even more imperative, because these people come from a very, very clear space of cognitive thinking and understanding a POV only from a perspective that they understand, and they are very, very firm on it. So to get somebody to coach them, to get them to understand how that POV resonates, lands, and works with the team members, is something where we are actually now starting to partner with executive coaches so that we can actually build the right kind of leadership bench strength there. And as we kind of move along, we've, of course, also, for us, soft skills is an existing aspect. We don't really have to work on it, because telling stories is what we do for a living. But the interesting aspect for us is the inclusive culture and getting people to one point of view. I don't know how many of you have heard, but the term POV, a point of view, is so loosely thrown around by kids today. And everybody has a POV, and everybody has a point of view. So when we talk about inclusive culture, how do we resonate? How do we rein that back in a creative organization, without killing the aspect of people putting their viewpoints forward in the next time around? Because it's easy for youngsters to do that. Sonal and I both spoke about risk taking. We both spoke about the fact that the faster you fail, the faster you learn. But you need to create that environment which is very, very safe, but still very fast paced in getting those stories out. And that's where the merit of a very nuanced C-suite leader, HOD, is what brings the entire thing into spectrum for us. And for that, coaching is something that we've realized is a very important perspective for them, because they are very clear of the story they want to tell, but they don't want to hear the different POVs that people have. And that's where coaching becomes imperative for us to take them forward, creating a next cadre of their succession plans, because they value their independence and would want to move out with the attrition spaces that we have. And the next part, which we realized, this is more so linear business, but the next part is the OTT, or the technical business that we have. Here, it's a completely creative plus an entrepreneurial business that is kind of coming together. So these two arms, as they're coming together, we've realized that we need to bring in technology and the perspective of technology, which allows us fungibility internally in India as well as in globe, to bring those pictures, to bring those narratives, to bring those stories to light. So those, in that term, we identify our internal top talent, and now we're pushing them with plans alongside with our competition hubs. So this is very unique. That's something that we're trying to do with Hotstar, with Geo, because the talent industry is very small. So now what you're trying to do is trying to see how can you adapt and what are the stories and narrations and a common forum platform that you can bring into the picture, because you've realized with the forum or with the talent with the landscape that we have basically three large organizations. The talent is only so much. The fungibility of talent in India is only going to be in a certain amount, and that talent rotates from one area to another. So while we invest, somebody else gets the dividends. While they invest, somebody else gets the dividend. We're actually now structuring it out to see how do we enhance this landscape so that it allows us to tell the best stories across India, and how do we resonate, how do we create something where we can pick up an entrepreneurial skill set from theirs to ours. And that's something very, very early, very exploratory, but it's exciting because you see competition kind of coming in together, but with the realization that the talent landscape that we have is limited, and we all need to invest in it together to create the right talent outside. And at the same time, how do we expand in geographies outside? So, of course, yeah.
Great, Kandali. Thank you for the insights. I think as someone commented, say now geography is history. But more importantly, you could see that we all talk about Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam. That is something which we see in kind of initiatives that you're looking at. Great. I mean, it's wonderful to see that you have a C-suite leader spread across the globe with a common purpose of fueling that creative engine that the Sony is known for. How this landscape is changing, and how do you kind of attract, nurture talent when the supply side is kind of limited. And how do you identify those people? Where are they? Could be Korea, it could be Timbuktu, it could be elsewhere. Sure. But how do you bring all of them together, okay, towards fueling growth? Great. Thanks, Kandali. Thanks so much for the insights. Again, we'll come back with some more questions. With those opening comments, I also see a lot of comments in the chat. And possibly some questions that we'll take up at the next stage. But now, slightly do it in a different way, in the sense that I'm going to share a perspective with the panelists, one each, and ask them to comment on that perspective as to what they feel about it, whether they are for or against, or they agree or not agree. Just to again add a little excitement, as we're saying that they don't know these perspectives, what's going to come them, but also to add a little more excitement, I've taken this to an extreme level. So the wording itself could be a little controversial, provocative. So let's see that thing. So Balaji, maybe I could start with you, right? And I'm going to put this perspective just because it's a certain line, so it'll be good to read that. Let me share this to. Let me just do the presentation mode. Just one second. Yeah. So Balaji, can I invite you to comment on this?
Well, absolutely. I think, at times, asking for too much of data is a defense mechanism, not to avoid that decision. I think some of the best, leaders, they instinctively, they're able to connect the dots and are able to, even with a little bit of insufficient data, take that calculated risk. So, for me, there is a sufficiency paradigm as far as data is concerned, that there's only up to a level that you will get data, but beyond that, one will never get data. So that's my perspective, especially on people.
Great. Wonderful. I think we can again pick up these threads during the Q&A.
Just
sure,
to
please,
add there,
please go on.
yeah. And in the realm of social life, there's nothing objective, right? It's a myth to believe, about objectivity in the realm of social interactions. So they're always going to be subjective. But yeah, I mean, so that's the second part. When I looked at the word objective, it really stuck out for me.
Great. Okay. So how do you kind of balance this? So you don't move to one side, being so objective that you miss out on being kind of discerning. Great. Okay. We'll pick up this thread again, Balaji, during Q&A. So now, Gandhali, can I invite you to comment on this?
I'm not able to see a screen.
Oh, okay. Well, just one second. I thought I was sharing, but looks like I wasn't.
Very good question. I was just speaking about the point of views and the POVs that children of today have to share. Okay, so this has actually been a debate in the water cooler topics in our organization itself. I think the way that I would like to articulate it is that while it's still evolving, there is a difference of expectations between generations. I think their generation gets what they're saying to each other and they know how to handle it. From the expectation that we have of how we are handling the new generation, it's a difference of expectation. So we feel that we're mollycoddling them. We feel that this is how they should be doing. There's erstwhile our folks said hard work is the only way to move forward in life. Smart work is not supposed to, however it may have evolved. I think it's perspectives which are different. Life is always going to be easier for the next generation because we are making it easier for them, and rightly so. But because we worked hard for it, we should pass on a better life and a life condition to them. And they are learning to be smarter about it. They're learning to optimally utilize gadgets. They're learning to optimally. They are smarter, wiser, much faster and ahead of times than what we were. So what may look like mollycoddling to us may actually just be the new normal for them. And the evolution from that is going to be what's going to take us up. So I think the moment of what we are presently seeing is going to be there for some time, because while we are all going to go through coaching, by the way, which is going to help us resonate and understand where does this lie and how to kind of deal with those aptitudes. But yeah, but I think we're kind of doing the right things. We may not be mollycoddling them as much as we think. It's just the new future.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Gandhali. So, Sonal.
My perspective.
Yeah.
Sure. So, I would answer this more rather than my thoughts, in the context of an organization. That's the way I would like to really answer this, because that's how the question was framed. So when you look at the context of an organization, and I'm going to talk more specifically about the topic, which is around leadership development and C-suite development. So the need to put a structure around the unstructured in an organizational context is high. So while, the intent may be loud and clear, but there is a need, for the organization, for the leadership to really see a structure around the unstructured. So the way I really look at it is, when you look at, so we say, leaders can either be intuitive or they can be objective. But the way I look at it is that leaders can be intuitive backed by objectivity. And the reason why I say so is, I know there are times which are unprecedented, like COVID times, where you had no experience to back you up. But what is really essential is that we have a framework which provides objectivity, and at the same time, it provides fluidity for intuition. But that intuition somewhere needs to be backed up or submerged in data and objectivity. And I'll tell you why I'm saying so. So this time when, I went to the Leadership Council with my presentation for succession planning, my first slide had 3 pointers. And the first pointer said, the decisions are going to be objective, not based on perception. Because if decisions are made on perception, then a lot of time a recency factor or their other perceptive factors may seep in. And I'll give you a classic example. An example may be, here is a person who's doing really well, performing really well, is a high potential. And suddenly, you see some dips happening in one quarter. Now, the reason why you need to have a framework, a structure, and objectivity backed up, because you don't want certain perceptions to really seep in. So while I'm not saying that, we should do away with intuition, but I feel a framework for operating, a structured framework for operating to lead to objectivity is important. But, we are all humans. There will always be subjectivity involved in it, but providing an arching framework is important.
Great. Thanks, Sonal. In fact, I'm going to put up for additional comments. I can't let you go without commenting on another perspective that I'm going to put up now. Right? Just sharing now. Yes, Sonal? So Sonal, could read that?
Yeah, I read
Yeah.
it. So the way, I would really answer that question is, there is a certain competence which I feel is core, is essential, which cuts across levels. And I would consider AI as that competence. But, as far as strategic orientation and people orientation is concerned, I think those are the 2 pillars of what where leadership really lies on. And I don't think, those 2 competencies we could ever replace by AI. And I'll tell you something, when it comes to AI, the way I really look at, when you look at leadership as a concept, we always say it's not about the what, it's about the how. And when you look at the how, you look at the process, and that process entails an end-to-end process including bringing about a closure to something. You know, in my mind, when I look at something like an AI, and let me tell you today in the context of the organization. So if I look at AI today, where is that, and we are a technology organization, right? And AI is one of our core offerings. So today, where am I using AI? And let me tell you in the preface of development. I can use AI in the preface of development if I have to make certain cognitive assessments. I can use AI if I have to do, just a high potential identification based on metrics. So for me, can AI bring about a closure to my development process? My answer is a no. So for me, AI can feed into my development process, but what is going to bring about a closure to my development process is the human-centric process. And that is the reason I feel that strategic orientation, people orientation are core competencies, and they will continue to be so. And of course, I really do believe we have a long way to go as far as AI is concerned. In fact, I don't know, if you've read, there is this recent publication from London School of Business, which is how AI has been being used for selection tool. Now, when we look at AI, what AI really does is AI is just using past data and it's drawing inferences. And that past data can be based on perceptions. And there is this, if you see, there is this kind of a legal thing which is tussle going on right now, saying that that entire AI tool is very perceptive. And it is talking about perception about gender. So in my opinion, we've not evolved to a stage where AI can take over the core leadership competencies.
Great. Great. Thanks for that, Sonal. Someone said that we possibly want to consider AI as a co-pilot, not the pilot that
Absolutely
takes that. That will your discretion as to where you want to use it, where you don't want to use it. Great. Thanks. Before we open for Q&A, I just wanted to invite the panelists, Sonal, Ghazali, Balaji, any additional comments based on some of the perspectives that we shared? Would you like to add something?
Maybe just one perspective on AI, and I completely agree with what Sonal was also saying. While AI obviously is going to, help, and particularly in our industry again, AI is an optimization tool for us, right? It gives us the first build of the script, and that's where we start the next build. But in terms of course, people excellence, you cannot go away because the story has to be told for a person and it has to land with the humans. So it's about how you are going to be using AI, and it does cut across the spectrum of the organization. And for us, we're actually starting to use that as one of the key building tools, because for us, it's all about optimization and productivity. So it gives us the first build. It shortens our storytelling time, but the narrations that has to be done and the people connect that has to be done at the end is all about the human storytelling that's going to come through. So completely agree.
Sure. Great. Balaji, anything from you?
Yeah, I'm a self-proclaimed skeptic of AI.
Yeah.
Because again, going back to, I belong to a school of thought where I would say that yes, it can be leveraged as a tool, but my biggest fear is that at times of number, unconsciously, we tend to doubt our own judgment and over rely on AI because, quote unquote, we think it is objective. As long as we do not fall into that trap and do not get influenced by it unduly, I think AI is good, but somewhere the boundary line needs to be drawn, and each one to oneself to that extent. Because I've seen leaders, and I've had a strong point of view and disagreements with some of my leaders in the past, where they would want to rely their judgment completely on the data which comes out of a psychometric or a development center.
Correct.
That's a very, very dangerous trap to fall into, right? And I personally believe that one of the core responsibilities of a leader or a manager is actually the ability to identify and judge talent. That cannot be outsourced. So that's my skeptical self.
Great. Thanks. Thanks a lot, panelists. Thanks, Balaji, for the additional comments. Now we'll open up for questions. Q&A, we have another 20-25 minutes. As promised, that we have enough time for questions. So hope we'll have some very interesting questions that can deepen the kind of thoughts that has come across. So maybe you could unmute or Was, please go ahead.
Thanks, Raghu, and thanks, Sonal, Gandhali, and Balaji. Very interesting perspectives for coaches. I have a question, just what Balaji talked about and the question you asked, Raghu. From what I have seen in clients, there are two schools of thought. Am I right? One is some clients believe in data-supported coaching, meaning, depending on psychometric tools and assessments and everything. And there is some other schools of thought, where, including CFI, and of course, we do some assessment, but we don't rely totally on assessments alone, where the deep conversations you have to understand the coachee, and then what we call understand the story behind the story, and then identify potential areas, act as a mirror and a sounding board to the coachee, for the coachee himself or herself to discover. What are your views? I know Balaji told about his views, and then I'll ask all the three of you, what are your perspectives on that?
So I personally feel that, it should be a mix of both. So in the current context, and I'll tell you something, the thing with assessments is, so in our current context, we use a development center, which is the display of the competence in the here and now, a psychometric, which is a potential inlay of the competence, and a 360 feedback, which is a perception of a competence. So there are three very different tools. Now, the thing about, using any one of these tools, especially when we talk about a development center, which is the display of the competence in the here and now, I think it's very important for it to be a validated tool. And when I say a validated tool, see, there are a lot of tools which are floating in the industry right now. Until and unless you don't validate it against the organization, and if you do have a period of around 3 years where you're able to throw out a kind of a concurrent validity for those assessments, which pretty much tells you this is fit for purpose for my organization. So for example, the development centers that we do run, I cannot say that everybody should get a 4 out of a 5 in a development center. That is not true for my context. So when I do a concurrent validity on my current high potentials and my low potentials, and if my high potential themselves get a 3, that means for my context, my concurrent validity is 3. And all my assessments have to be validated. And as long as I do that kind of a validation, I won't say, that out of all the assessments, the development centers have our highest validity, but that validity also, in terms, if you look from a validation score, they say ideally it should be 0.42 and above. But the development center is something which comes closer to that. But I think as long as we do that kind of a validation test, it's important for us. And all the 3 concurrence of variables is very important if we have to do that. But as you say, the final proof of the pudding, I also feel till today is, while I'll hand over everything to the coach, I'll hand over the development center report, I'll hand over the 360 feedback, the psychometric, it will only be by the means of discovery and conversation that the real goal is going to surface. But I feel those are good grounds to initiate a more promising discovery. That's the way, I would like to answer it.
Okay. Balaji, Gandhali, any additional comments on that question?
Sure,
Balaji, no, you
I'll-
shared. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please.
but I think great question, Vas. I think again these are all belief systems and biases. I mean, I belong to the Gestaltian school of thought. I mean, for me, the individual is a whole, right? Is complete. So looking at an individual in the wholesomeness is extremely important, and any psychometric can only give you certain aspects of it. So that's number one, and partly a large part of it also has to be the result of the Cartesian framework, where you split everything into its components, and that's where the entire perspective on systems thinking comes, because the individual is a system, and the individual operates also within a system, right? So how the system influences behavior is something which is completely lost on any of these psychometrics. So again, if I were to add on to what Sonal said, the 3 data points, extremely important, but the secret sauce of the coach lies in actually connecting the dots and drawing insights out of it. And some of us who've seen the psychometrics of the earlier days, where we used to sit down and write the Hogan reports ourselves. We never depended on the system to give a profile or a personality assessment of the individual, but people used to actually sit down and write those reports. And the beauty of it was the ability to look at different data points, see patterns, connect the dots, and then be able to come up with a holistic view of the individual. I mean, that's my perspective, maybe still old school.
Okay, great. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, just the last part to this is just a reinforced input of what Sonal and Balaji kind of already spoke about. I've led those initiatives in my previous organizations where we bring in and we give all the God knows how many psychometric details and data points for the executive development processes. And those are just the starting point from a coach's perspective, because what the employee and what the leader wants, and that's where the merit of the coach kind of comes in, could be something different altogether, which has not yet been uncovered. And that's precisely what we learned as we took those processes forward and those conversations moved forward, is we uncovered as an organization that, what other aspects they needed help and support with. And that was the beauty of the executive coaches, bringing that to light and bringing that to conversation with us as an organization, and for us to kind of course correct our ways and mentor and give them a better or, different role that allowed them that success portfolios.
Well, Shekhar, your question. Ravi will come to you next.
Yeah,
Shekhar, please go
so
ahead.
my question is to Sonal. Normally in the time management, there are 4 quadrants. The 4th quadrant is where, we say it is important but not urgent. That is where we tend to spend time less. And unfortunately, people development falls under this category. That is why
Right.
many organizations fail. And even individuals also fail in developing the succession planning. So when you said it is institutionalized over a period of 6.5 years, the question is, what was the trigger 6.5 years back, and what kind of challenges were there in this journey? And how did it shape up?
Sure. So, I joined L&T Technology Services 10 years back, and they already had a full-fledged L&D function. And somewhere, that time, it was also the CEO's vision, and the CEO was obviously based out of US. And his vision was to have an organization development function in place. And he thought that that would be a great differentiator for us as an organization. And I think what I ended up doing was, of course, I joined to set up a separate function right from the scratch. And I did make a charter for 5 years. And a big part of that charter was that I drew the entire function into three parts. One was alignment, second was diagnostics, and the third was development. And I said, if you have to run a function, which is a leadership development function for the top management, it should have these three big buckets, because it's not enough for me to run diagnostics, to run assessment, and to run development. Alignment is very important. And when I say alignment, it means drawing out a culture that is pretty much role modeled by the leaders of this organization. So, and some strategic initiative which the leaders have to anchor to align this entire framework. So, I think that was the initial framework I came up with. In the last 6.5 years, if you were to really see, I think one of the most drawing factors for us as an organization was, if you look at the kind of skills that we have in the organization, it's very, very niche. And, there are a lot of people who may sit in an aero vertical, who may sit in an auto vertical or plant engineering, who come with very, very niche skills. So we were a techno-functional organization. And for us, it became very important as we wanted to scale. See, till you are at a certain threshold of growth, growth comes easy to you. And you pretty much look at more of proliferative growth. But after you reach a certain threshold of growth, you start looking at profitable, sustainable growth. And when you want that kind of a growth to happen, you want well-rounded leaders. Only techno-functional leaders are not going to cut it. So when we started going public and when we were going, to our next trench of growth, this huge ask that we should have an entire development framework which overlooks the succession planning framework came about. And I'll tell you what is really interesting. In the last 3 years, when I'm creating a succession planning framework, I'm not saying these are the identified leaders who are going to grow. What is really happening is that a purview to the 5-year strategy is given to me. And along with the CEO, we are seeing in the next 5 years, how is every vertical going to grow in scale, in revenue, and how is the org design going to change? And what we are feeding in is into the future of the organization, not into the present. So every person who today I've picked up for succession planning is feeding into the future of the organization. And I think that was the ask from the function, that are we making an organization ready for the future, which is in alignment with our Lakshya strategy? So challenges, I think what challenges I saw was to take the entire framework to a stage of credibility where I say that it's the how that drives the what. And because, when you want to institutionalize a framework where you say the only way you're going to go up the hierarchy is through a leadership development process, you need to prove the credibility of the process. And I think that took us a little time, but I think it's so much settled in with the leaders now that is strongly the how that is going to drive our what. And I think it is these tangible results which has really enabled that transition.
Great. Yeah, so it's the how that drives the what. Great. Yeah. Ravi, please go ahead. Yeah.
It's been wonderful listening to all of you. So I want to actually raise a slightly provocative question. See, all of you are from industries where your main asset is people and talent. Actually, it's not machinery or long-established brands, etc. And so human resources is actually your main resource. And then you must have heard of this cliche that human resource management is too important to be left to HR function only. The CEO needs to get involved. So my question is actually, what is your real life experience? What is the role the CEO is playing in the sort of areas we just talked about today?
I guess if I were to answer that, and you do know, because, you've been a part of our interventions, and for every intervention, you've spoken to the CEO and you know how integral he is to the entire intervention. So for us, it's very, very clear. And, I'm a strong believer that we are the facilitators for the organization. The person who's sitting in the driver's seat is the CEO, and the success of it lies. And it's not just because, we want it to be blessed by the leadership on the top. I think they are the people who know what are the realities, how the landscape is shifting, and they are the people who need to be in touch with the leaders that are evolving and with the leaders that are really going to lead the future. So as far as we are concerned, the commitment to the leadership team is done by a three-pronged approach. One is that the leadership development journeys are owned by a business leader. So if I have a middle management journey, it's owned by the CEO of the company. The sales leadership development journey is owned by the CSO. So they are the face for these development journeys. The second is they are all co-facilitators in these development journeys. And the third is we do have a talent review committee, which comprises of the CXOs, which really see how these entire interventions are taking shape and what is the measurement and what is the return on investments of these interventions. So that's how it's happening in the organization today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything from you, Kambali, Balaji, any additional comments?
So Ravi, something that I touched upon before as well is, of course, the industry is so different. For us, by the virtue, the CEO, all your MCM, which is your top management, would of course be involved. And they have to lead these agendas, because if you have to go on a talent hunt across the globe, they are also the people who are going to give us indicators of where it's going to be led, where to really pick up those gems from. So for us, it's very, very collaborative in terms of how the development piece is also coming, and in terms of how acquisition piece is also coming, because like we said, that the industry is very small, so it goes very hand in hand and it goes very, very fast. But both of us co-own this agenda very, very strongly.
Yeah, Balaji.
So a slight nuance, and by the way, Ravi, hi. So I had a friendly fight with Ram Charan on this aspect, and finally we agreed to disagree, because Ram was the one who said important to be left to HR, and I disagreed with him. See, the way I look at it is, I think you'll have two sets of CEOs, right? One who are really genuinely concerned about the people equation of the business. And there is another set of leaders who don't have that muscle, right? And in each one of these two scenarios, I have to play a different role, right? And for me, the way I look at it is, while the on the ground work they need to do, but I'm the one who's conducting that orchestra. Right. So that part I cannot abdicate. And my skin is in the game when it comes to the talent equation. And I partner, and I at the same time I orchestrate it to ensure that at the end of the day, the CEO's agenda of growing a business or scaling a business is met through the talent equation. And the way at least I've done it in the past also is that, again, quite provocative. Traditionally, the business reviews and talent reviews are distinct and separate and bifurcated. I think where we hit the sweet spot was when we are doing business reviews. Along with it, we do the talent reviews and look at the entire talent equation of the business. When the business is not doing well, let's say, you do a why and go back to the person who's either heading that business or the team, and that's the secret sauce. And that's how the entire synergy, amalgamation, or the integration between the people side of the organization, or the HR side of the organization, and the business side of the organization, they actually come together.
I think just one more thing I want to add, and I know this is going to sound a little, maybe offbeat and different, but if you do know, in the recent past, there have been a lot of discussions as to whether the entire leadership development and the OD function should sit within HR or it should sit into the functional arena, reporting to the CEO or to the CEO. Now, if you do see in the current context, like organizations like LinkedIn and Google, the entire function is not sitting within HR. So because the belief is that that function needs to be more aligned to the CEO. So I guess that's another school of thought where I think a lot is being written and debated on. But while some organizations have already made that transition, I don't see much of that, tailing out in India.
Interesting. Was not aware of that actually. Very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Saroja, please go ahead. Maybe a couple of questions more. Saroja, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. One moment. Yes. Hi. Wanted to thank you all for a wonderful perspective, wonderful session. Good to know from the industry what's happening in this space. And I'm a coach, a practicing coach for the last 12 years. And my question to the panelists here is, wearing a coach's hat, since all of you did speak about how important coaching is to you. One of the things that we see, both as individual practitioners or CFI sees it as an organization offering coaching, is that we are increasingly finding a pushback from organizations for the classic one-on-one executive coaching, which is both in terms of time and, probably investment, fairly intensive, and is seen as something that organizations feel it takes a lot of time and, our executives can't afford it. We can't help, we really can't put that kind of effort, time and money into this. So is there something like a faster turnaround? Can you do something which is, a little shorter? And all of that, whereas the experience that we've had when classic coaching has been done is that obviously while it takes time, it also is extremely effective because it takes time to get deeper into what is actually causing the limiting beliefs and what are some of the things that are coming in the way of the person's behavioral change. So just wanted to get a sense from all of you in the current milieu. We understand the time constraints, we understand the investment constraints, we understand what could be driving this whole move towards slightly shorter, crisper T20 coaching. Wanted to understand your perspective on where do you see this playing out? What are your views on classic versus speed coaching, and what do you think is something that we as coaches can take away from this? Thanks.
So I come from an old school. I don't believe in speed coaching. And I guess, as far as the organization's pushing back, I think it's all about what is the credibility of the process that you build in the organization and what is the context in which you're placing coaching. Mm-hmm. If you're placing coaching in a context where you are saying that you're going to delve upon behaviors and the whole objective is that we've done all the assessments, but we're going to delve on behaviors and we're going to cause a paradigm shift in behaviors, which is a sustainable shift.
Right.
If that is my core objective of coaching, I know I need to give it that time because every behavior, to make a shift in behavior takes time until it becomes a habit.
Right.
So for me, nothing comes before 10 months. And I think that's the construct that I've placed in front of the organization, and the organization really understands that construct well. Excellent. Now, whether it is individual coaching or group coaching, the contexts are different. But one thing is very clear, coaching is meant for a desired purpose. There is a psychology behind the methodology. And I think that's what we need to respect if we need to see those results.
Great.
Yeah.
Really
Great.
good to hear that evangelism for coaching coming from
Yeah.
you. Very, very
So,
nice.
So Gandhali and Balaji, a minute each on this question, then we'll invite Krishna and Sri to give their comments.
Sure.
Wrap up.
So very quickly, I think a great question. I think the answer lies somewhere in between, because the way I look at it is coaching is a trusting relationship, and the trust can't be built in a one or two session, maybe, So there needs to be a modicum of time which people really need to spend to ensure that coaching
Audio's going off,
is
Balaji.
effective. Now, having said that, I think it boils down to a couple of parameters. I think, and again, don't mistake me, to a large extent, it also. Okay, am I audible now?
Yeah, go ahead, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, there's something gone wrong. So, Gandhali, your comments on that? Maybe a minute.
So that's a great question. From the experience that I've seen across industries when we go in for coaching, and I definitely am all in for the original coaching because it takes that time, that energy, that trust creation that needs to happen for that transformation to come through. And it takes time for that impact of that transformation also to come through. So to really see that needle shift. So most of the times what you always see the organizations do is look at the top brass for executive coaching in the most simplistic sense, I'm telling you guys. And when you go in for the larger audience or the bigger chunk of the middle management of where you want to build in your coaching perspectives there, that's when you look at which are the ones that you want to disproportionately invest in, but which are the ones that you still want to kind of keep on the tabs and keep the burner hot over there. One of the things and that's where a good strong OD design and intervention is going to make the big difference of articulating out what the need of that objective is. So I've seen organizations also decide to go in for a large burner approach, which is the quick one in and out. And I've also seen a lot of organizations becoming extremely mindful and saying, let's create internal coaches. And you see a lot of organizations go for that now because they want to develop the coaching culture itself within the organization. But in all, some, it's not going to be one and even game. It's going to be together. But to see the biggest impact come through at the topmost brass, it always will be a journey that will lead to the transformation and the impact of the transformation to come through. And look, I've also had these conversations with the coaches, and it's always a conversation that leads to them investing that money and that turnaround and the ROI that they're ultimately looking for and responsible for. So I just got it's a brilliant question.
Thank you. Thank you for the word of confidence in coaching, though. Thank you. Yeah, made our day. Yeah.
Great. So we are now 12:32, and so it's time to wrap up. And thank you so much, Sonal, Gandhali, and Balaji had to drop off because he had some commitments. And for all the thoughts, insights, and views you have, and also some fabulous questions from the fellow coaches. It's so enriching, a lot of takeaways. I think Nipa also shared, and quite a few of you have shared, I think the number, the kind of the insights that you've gained through the 1.5 hours, right? I'm sure that there's going to be demand for a sequel to this because the kind of ideas that got generated so far. Yeah. So look forward to another festival of learning soon, and we'll be in touch, Sonal, Gandhali, and Balaji also. Yeah. And hopefully we'll meet again for another enriching session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of this session today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Raghu, for hosting us. Thank you.
Thanks
a lot.
Thanks
Thank
for joining in.
Thank
Thanks
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you, Mr. Krishna.
Thank you.